On the show, Peter is the CEO of Euro-Pacific Capital and host of the Schiff Show. Many people wonder what the options would be for Greece if it leaves the Eurozone. So Aaron first asked Peter if Greece could become the free market paradise of Europe like Singapore or Hong Kong in Asia. And here's what he had to say.
Well, not with its current leadership, unless they, do an about-face and surprise everybody. Because if you listen to their rhetoric, they're not free market guys. I mean, they're socialists over there, and so I don't see much hope for Greece in that respect. I mean, you might think the best hope would be to stay in the Eurozone, where they have some discipline and where they have a currency that people can have some confidence in, even though people haven't been too confident in the euro recently. I think they'd have a lot more confidence in the euro than the resurrected drachma. Although, when you speak about the euro, we're back up at about 110 right now against the dollar. And, I think the U.S. dollar is in the process of forming a major top that could be the final top for the dollar. And once this top is fully formed, I think the bottom is going to fall out of the dollar very quickly, and it's going to be a precipitous decline.
And, what is the likelihood of the drachma coming back? You mentioned that before, but it is on the table as something that could happen.
Well, I think they keep that card out there, but I think they're very reluctant to play it because, again, it's not going to go very well for the Greeks if they try to return to a drachma that nobody is going to want. And I also think it will be a powerful example for other countries that might be thinking about following in their footsteps to rethink that and get their economic houses in order to stay in the Eurozone rather than to be exiled to a currency that collapses in value, because runaway inflation is not going to solve the problems in Greece. But the real problem was, why was Greece able to borrow so much money in the first place? And that was because of the moral hazard that is inherent in that system, which should have been dealt with back then, and they still have yet to deal with it. There needs to be the idea that there is no backstop for sovereigns in Europe, that the ECB will not bail out a government that borrows beyond its capacity to repay, so that interest rates have to reflect the various risks associated with different countries. So that if you're Italy or you're Spain, you got to borrow at a much higher rate than Germany because there's a better chance that there will be a default.
Peter, what are your thoughts on China? We recently got a lot of data that showed us what we all kind of knew, and that being that growth is slowing there. So what impact will slower growth in China have on the global economy?
Well, I think that China ultimately is being held back by its own monetary policy, which is designed to prop up the value of the U.S. dollar and to suppress the value of its own currency. And that creates distortions and bubbles within the Chinese economy. But beneath the surface, I think, beats the heart of a very vibrant economy that has been unleashed ever since they started rolling back all the big government programs of the communist days. And so there is a vibrant economy trapped beneath this bad monetary policy that ultimately, I believe, is going to come to an end. I mean, we'll see. The Chinese have been quietly accumulating gold. We don't know how much they have. They haven't been accumulating dollars as rapidly as they once were. They're still holding on to a huge stockpile. But I think they've figured out that, that they've made mistakes with respect to the peg, and they're looking for a way to basically restore their currency to one that is no longer tied to the U.S. dollar. And I think when they do that, the currency is going to rise rather substantially. And I think the purchasing power of average Chinese citizens is going to rise dramatically. And they're no longer going to have to be exporting so much to the United States. They will be consuming a lot of what they produce themselves. Meanwhile, over the years, China is trading with a lot more nations. China is now a larger trading partner with more nations than the United States. And so China is certainly rising in importance, and it's dominating global trade. And it will be even more significant once they fully depeg their currency from the dollar and allow their currency to rise and the dollar to sink.
And what about the objectively strong dollar? We knew that it took a slight hit recently, but overall it's been pretty strong. So why is the U.S. dollar so strong at the moment, and is this a sign that the U.S. economy is recovering?
Well, the dollar wasn't necessarily strong in that its domestic purchasing power wasn't really growing. It was just less weak than other currencies, like the euro, for example. But so the dollar was, on a relative basis, not as weak as other currencies, and so the dollar rose relative to those other currencies. But the reason for that relative strength was the false belief and false confidence that the United States has a genuine recovery and that the Federal Reserve is going to begin raising interest rates. None of that is true. We don't have a real recovery. We have a bubble. And the Fed is not getting ready to raise rates. They're getting ready to launch QE4. The truth that nobody wants to acknowledge is everything that the Federal Reserve has done since the financial crisis has made the underlying problems that caused that crisis worse. And so the U.S. economy is in the worst shape it's ever been in. And if the Fed were to raise interest rates, we would have another financial crisis much worse than the one we had in 2008. So they're trapped in this 0% QE world that they can't get out of. And ultimately, the end crisis now is going to be a currency crisis when the world figures out the box that we're in, and then the dollar collapses, and that's when we have the currency crisis, and that should precipitate the type of financial crisis that the Fed is hoping to avoid by its monetary policy. But it doesn't avoid it. It simply delays the day of reckoning. But unfortunately, the longer we delay that day, the more we have to reckon with.
Peter, I understand that you think that we're going to ultimately get another round of quantitative easing or a Q4. So why do you believe that we're going to get more QE and not a rate hike? I mean, in the past, the U.S. economy and the markets, they've been able to rally on 3 to 4% interest rates. So why not increase rates and just see what happens?
Well, the America in the past that used to be able to handle 4 or 5% interest rates had a much lower amount of debt. So it's one thing, when you have a small amount of debt, not that it was necessarily small, but given how much more debt we have now, that 4% of interest rate would be a much greater burden on the economy today than it would have been 10 or 20 years ago when we had a lot less debt.